right. Well, we are going to get started this morning, and Brother David Reinhardt is our missionary in Chile, and he has been there for 43 years, and we've not supported him that entire time, but probably 20-some years of that, and they came to be supported from our church through Bill and Diane, who knew Brother Reinhardt from Colorado, and when Bill and Diane moved out here, they said, we're only joining the church if you support Brother Reinhardt, or something like that. I don't know what that was. Bill negotiated. If we drop this lousy missionary over here, then we can pick up Brother Reinhardt. But we began supporting him and their family, and it's a blessing to have him. He was here last sometime around COVID. We don't like to talk about that. But if many of you have not been here since you started coming, so this will be your first chance meeting him. It's important that we get to know our missionaries, and that's why I like, if at all possible, I get our missionaries to come back on a Sunday morning where we can really learn about that field, what's going on, what the challenges are, how we can pray for them. As there are projects they're working on that we can help with, things of that nature, and get connected. We know that you're not going to connect with all 20-some of our missionaries, but if you connect with one missionary and you pray for them faithfully, and that motivates you to be faithful in your giving to missions and things of that nature, that's what we want to accomplish. And so Brother Reinhardt's going to come and talk about the field of Chile, and he's got a video. And you want to do the video first, or do you want to come up and talk first? Okay, he wants to talk first. He's a Baptist preacher. Of course he wants to talk. Thank you, brother.
Well, good morning. As the pastor was saying, last time I was here was right in the middle of COVID, and your church decided to go ahead and have services anyway. And I remember you had pews at that time, so there was every other pew. And anybody remember that? Every other pew X's, and so you can't sit next to somebody. So, and we actually, when I was here, we drove back to Springfield, Missouri, and from there I had to head out in a rental car out to L.A. to catch a flight back to Miami to get back to Santiago, and then drive the 24 hours back to our apartment because it was the last flight going into the country before they closed down the border. So it was some special times back then, and we all have fond memories. But I'm glad to be back again with you. I'm traveling without my wife, Hope, but I won't say I'm hopeless. I'm hopeful. She's waiting for me back in Springfield. She just had 2 hip surgeries 6 weeks apart, and so it's kind of hard to be a number of hours in the car and such. So she decided she trusted me to come by myself, and so. But anyway, I'm glad to be here with you this morning. I do have a 7-minute video I want to show. This video is about 5 years old, and actually we've seen more things happen since then, and I'll share that after we see the video. So if we can see the video now.
John E. Reinhardt and son, John Jr., arrived in Potrerillos, Chile in 1928 to work the copper smelter for the Anaconda Copper Mining Company of Montana. They would dedicate approximately 14 years in Chile, taking out the precious copper from the hills surrounding the small town of Potrerillos. Perhaps John and his brother's greatest accomplishment was to design the first carro tren, an automobile set to function on railroad tracks to make it up to the mine, as they were only railroad tracks that would get there. John Jr. was only 4 years old when he arrived and eventually returned to the States at 18 years of age to serve in the armed forces in World War II. John married and settled down in California with 5 children, the youngest being David, who grew up hearing stories of the miners' lives in northern Chile, never dreaming that one day he would also live there. David, after being saved at 16 years of age, later married Hope, a preacher's daughter from Montana. In Bible college at BBC, Dave and Hope felt the call to be missionaries to the land of Chile, returning something much more precious than copper that his grandfather had extracted from the country, taking the precious gospel of salvation to the heathen north of Chile, and starting New Testament Baptist churches. Arriving on the field in 1981, the first 2 years were spent in language school. Although a small Bible study was started with limited Spanish acquired in classes, during this Bible study, a young man, Fernando, a bitter communist with little direction in life, was saved. God later would call Fernando to become David's first national pastor to a church started in Tierras Blancas. About the same time, another church was started in Coquimbo with Reuben, who had been saved in the new church there. But the main work that Hope and David started would be in La Serena, where an impact church was established. An impact church is a solid church of about 200, which serves as a hub for starting a number of missions. One of the more important ministries in this church was the Bible Institute, which was established to prepare future national pastors. This work in La Serena continues to grow, and today is under the pastorate of Luis, who graduated from the Bible Institute. His church is running about 450. The first mission started was by a young man, Celso, who left with wife Lily to start in the south of Chile in a town called Osorno. Then another young man was sent from this church to Ovalle, a town about 1 hour to the southeast, where Luis' twin brother, Jose Luis, today pastors. Another church started was in the city of Copiapó, about 4 hours north, where today Pastor Juan Carlos is pastoring. Then another mission started in the countryside in a small town of Barrancas, about half an hour southeast under the direction of Jose. And still another work that has been started by a man out of La Serena is Barrio Universitario under the direction of Pastor Walter. The latest church plant that has come out of the La Serena work is in a southern suburb called Bosque San Carlos under Pastor Christian. Another family also has been sent out of the church as a foreign missionary and has gone to the country of Portugal. 12 years ago, David, seeing that the church in La Serena was doing well under its own pastor, Luis, felt the call to begin a new impact church 15 hours farther to the north in a city called Iquique. The city of Iquique is limited in space, being a strip of land nestled between the coast and the hills, making it difficult to find a sizable piece of property to build a church. This meant that the next option was of buying a house and converting it. The house was transformed through a 2-year building project into a 2-story church building with an auditorium that will seat 200. There, God blessed this newly started congregation, where today they have a group running about 160. It has not reached 200, but it's on its way. There, another Bible Institute has begun preparing future pastors. A nucleus of families out of Iquique was used to start a new church in nearby Alto Hospicio, where David's son Dustin has now developed this congregation into a mature body of over 100. Together, father and son will be working together to see new churches established in the north. The next project will be with Guillermo, in a mission to be started on the north side of the city of Iquique. Also, another church plant will be started in an interior town of Pozo el Monte, or Pica, an oasis in the middle of the desert. There's also a ministry started out of the church by Abner called Alas de Gracia, where each year they conduct evangelistic trips to the islands in southern Chile. They will have week-long medical clinics to the sparsely populated islands and give out the gospel to the patients, as well as going door to door in the villages. The hope is to see some missions started with souls that have been saved and trained. After 38 years on the field, Dave and Hope do not feel that their ministry is over and believe that the best years are yet to come. David's theme verse is 2 Corinthians 12:15. A few years back, 33 miners were trapped underground for months hoping for a rescue, which finally set them free. Today, many Chileans, like those miners, are in peril, being trapped in their superstitions and pagan religious rites, needing a spiritual rescue with the gospel of Christ. It took a team of rescuers to save the lives of those trapped miners, as it takes a large team of Christians to rescue the precious souls of lost Chileans. We are thankful for the churches that have partnered with the Reinhardts to bring the precious truth of Jesus Christ to the northern and southern parts of the country of Chile. Potrerillos gave us copper. Let's give them back the gospel. A gracious thanks from Dave and Hope.
So 43 years ago, this was a 5-year-old tape that we showed, but we went down to Chile as church planters, independent fundamental Baptist churches down there, because the idea is if you're only going to just be reaching people, God didn't call us to make believers, He called us to make disciples. And to make a disciple, you need a local church. You need them to be able to be saved, baptized, be trained, get into ministry, and even go out and be pastors. In October, we had there was a service that we had. It was a Sunday night service. It was evening. And I did something special because I preached on giving your whole life to Christ, especially for full-time service. And we have a lot of young people in the church. And I had a candle lit in front after in the invitation, and a table with other candles there. And I offered, if you're willing to give your life full-time, not by emotions or anything else, but you want to give your life to be a full-time in the ministry, come forward, light your candle with mine, and stand up here. We had 11 young people walk forward, 8 boys and 3 girls that came forward. So we started another ministry. We do have an institute, but we started what's called our Timothy School. And with the Timothy School, the idea is taking these high schoolers and out of high schoolers and taking them at that time. Many of them have broken homes and such as that. And so they need much more than just we're going to teach them their doctrine, we're going to teach them strategies, but we're also going to help them form habits in their lives, strategies in their lives to be able to deal with a broken home and such as that. And so I do ask your prayers on that. But we believe our best years are still ahead. At this moment, I'm calm because in our church service, we'll be having church, we're at the same hour as you guys are right now. So at 11 o'clock, our service starts, and my son Dustin will be preaching there. Last Sunday, they baptized 6. And so he says they're getting visitors every service, and so we're just thrilled that God is able to do something. And the only reason we can do that is because churches such as this have supported us so that we can dedicate our time completely there and not be trying to look for funds or something else while we're there. So I do appreciate it. And when you think about it, now, I have a daughter that lives in Springfield, and she has 2 little girls, and her favorite expression is, "Good job." How many have heard that? Okay, could you practice that with me? 1, 2, 3. Now do it with a tone. I mean, really, like your daughter just did something. She just cleaned her room by herself or something. 1, 2, 3. Good job. Now, in the book of 3 John, I'm really impressed with that letter. John tells his children, which would be his followers, because they are helping the strangers, which in this case strangers are talking about believers from other congregations that were unknown to them. They went out for his name's sake. And because they were helping them along the way, he said to his followers, his children, "You've done a good work. Good job." And so John's saying, "Good job." And I would say the same to this congregation here. Good job. Because you're helping not just me, but other missionaries around the world take the gospel and start churches. And you're going to see a lot of eternal fruit because of that. So it's like I was in the Air Force, but there's not only pilots. I wasn't a pilot, by the way, SR-71. No, I didn't. But I worked in a weather station. But if it wasn't for the people that worked in the weather stations and the cooks and the administrators and the mechanics, the pilots could never do their mission. And so churches we're all part of the same team that we're taking the gospel and making disciples. And if you look at it this way, how many of you anybody remember writing a letter and taking it to the post office? Anybody still remember that? Okay. How about it? You write a nice love. I remember in the Air Force, I wrote these nice love letters, and I take them down to the post office on base to be sent to my girlfriend. Now, what happens if I have a really beautiful letter written, and the letter, the perfume smells so good, and I put it in the post office, but I forgot one thing. I forgot to put any postage on it. Is that letter going to get there? Sweet words, life-changing, but never got there. There was no postage, and that's what missions is about. It's putting the postage on the love letters that God wrote to us about how Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins. And so we've been down the field now for 43 years. We've started 2 more churches since the one we did on the video, and God is blessing there. One of the churches that was in town, another church in town left their facilities, so they now just moved into brand new facilities, are really nice with room to grow. And then the other one we're starting down back in La Sedena. So we're church planners. We see God is moving, and pastor was asking what kind of government's going on now in Chile, and right now we've gone through some tough times. We had COVID, as you did. We also had disturbances in the streets because paid people from outside the country paid people to do these protests and things like that. I won't mention names, so I won't get into politics right now, but doing like that. And so we have our borders are now open. Our country's being flooded. Our economy is in the I want to say something in Spanish, but it's down in the basement. The economy. We have a communist president. Things aren't the best, and you know what that means? People are more open to the gospel. You know, because the truth is when everybody's fine and they have enough to eat and they have everything, you know, they don't have time for that. But we are seeing people really open. We have we just had a guy start coming to our church. Have you ever had somebody come in from a different town to come to your church service? Well, this guy was flying in to our church service. He's the vice admiral of the country of Chile, of the Navy. He's the second command of all the country of Chile. And I didn't know who he was because he's just, you know, wearing regular clothes coming in. But I have some naval officers in my church, and they're all going. And then they come up, Pastor, you know who that is? I says, I have no idea. He's the vice admiral. He's my boss's boss. And so he's not saved yet. I ask you to pray for him. But he is, Yerko is his name. And he's now just recently retired, but he was a romantic interest as a reason why he's in our church, by the way. But he is interested, and we're praying that he will come to know Christ as Savior because he's still working with the Navy on certain things. But the truth is, it doesn't matter what part of life you're in. You have an eternal soul is important to God. And we're seeing foreigners, we're seeing military, we're seeing business people, we're seeing all different types of people coming to know Christ as their Savior, and they're open. And so I am just thrilled. In fact, we're going back in May, and I'm really excited about getting back because, like I said, I think our best days are yet to come. Pray for my wife as she has 2 hip surgeries and is supposed to have a knee surgery, but we'll probably wait and come bring her back here in January, maybe so she doesn't have 3 surgeries in a matter of 2 months. So this is what we're doing on the field, and I'm thankful for Bill and Diane that we have that contact that we had back in years back when I was in internship back in Denver Baptist Temple. And so those connections never end. I'm real thankful to see them here today. I wondered if anybody had a question they would like me to direct towards what's going on in our country, whether it's on the level of the society or our church or our plans. I have a burden for the national pastors up and down our country. Not all the national pastors in Chile are mine. I mean, like I said, I've got about a number of national pastors that we've prepared, but there's a lot of others. And I have a burden that not all of them have the best training. And so we want to start an established Bible college in Iquique. And to be able to do that, connect with another fundamental Bible college here, and be able to offer to help these pastors get further training, because I believe it's very important that the pastor has training, not just somebody just comes up to the pulpit, but someone trained doctrine, strategies, and such as that. So that's one of the goals that I have now as I'm going forth, is to start work more and more with the other national pastors. So, does anybody have a question? The government directly, we have not sensed where we can. In fact, probably have more liberties in Chile than you have here in the United States. Where we're seeing it now is Chile is like a copycat of the United States. Anything the United States does, they want to do the same thing. And so right now, the big thing there in the government is protecting the rights of the gay and transgender communities and trying to make it difficult for anybody to teach the Word of God, which we will always do. In fact, I did a 3-night conference on transgender and homosexuality based on what the Scriptures has to say, which is also by science. And so it was very eye-opening for a lot of people to understand what God's view is on that issue, because they're being bombarded in the schools and the government that the companies can't discriminate and all these different things. And so in that sense, we sense that they're trying to limit the churches to preach the plain gospel. And so in that sense, most of the churches I know are not paying attention to what the government says. They're going to do it one way or another. So far, we have not had any repercussions. But even if they were to do repercussions, we don't care. You have to preach the whole counsel of God. And so, but in that sense, they're being a communist. It's gone really, really bad. So we're kind of hoping that the elections later this year, I think, they're going to reverse and go back to a more conservative. Okay, good question. Yes? I would say that if you want to describe the religious, Chileans are very religious people. I use the terms Catholics, cults, and charismatics, okay? And so that's what we have in our country. And probably the worst thing for us is the bad testimony of religions. They only want your money. The pastors become dictators in their congregations, and they've done a lot of bad things. And so most people already have kind of a religion is bad. And I'll give an example. We had a family move into our town. Her name was Karina. His name was John. And Karina went to get her hair done. And when she went to get her hair done, the lady that did her hair was from my church. And she was lonely. She didn't know anybody in town and stuff, and was talking about her marriage problems and things like that. And so the lady in our church said, well, why don't you come and talk to our pastor? So she came to our church and started attending, and she made her husband talk to me. So John, a real Chilean name, John Stevens. So John, big tall guy about my height, he's sitting in my office, and his arms are crossed like this. And he says, I feel like I'm in the principal's office. I said, John, don't worry about it. I'll talk to your wife. You don't have to come back. And I kind of joked around a little bit about how difficult marriage is and things like that. When the hour was over with, I said, so I'll talk to your wife. You don't have to come back. And he says, but can I come back if I want? I said, well. So, yeah, sure. And so he came back the following Saturday. But this is why I said that. So the first thing he says, before we get started, I just want to let you know I'm an atheist. I said, cool. That's good. And then he says, you want to know why I'm an atheist? I says, okay, yeah, why are you an atheist? Because I'm disillusioned with religion. And I said, me too. He didn't expect that answer from me. I said, yeah, I think religion's terrible. And so by that, he came another 3 or 4 weeks, and finally he got saved. His wife got saved, and their son got saved. Well, John was saved. All of them have been baptized. John works our sound booth now in our church. His wife, who sings very well and sings in our choir, she just invited one of her clients that would say, we can't find a church. They were Catholics. They weren't saved. And so they came to our church, Jorge and Romy. And Jorge is now one of our elected officials, like a councilman in our city. And they brought other councilmen from the city to come to our services as well. And they love the church. They've gotten saved and baptized. And little John, he's one of the 8 young men that came forward to give his life to be a preacher. All because people are turned off to religion, but they're not turned off to a relationship with Jesus Christ. And that's one of the things that we we stress there is how that put the religions aside. But see, of course, the Catholic Church is always going to get the benefits of being part of the country, you know. But Argentina is 95% Catholic, and Chile is only 80% Catholic. We have a strong evangelical group. Now, they're not Baptists, but we do have a strong group. But again, bad testimony. The cults have a bad testimony of being like cults, you know. You do it our way or no way and things like that. Mormons, Jehovah's Witness, and such as that. And so we have a lot of religion, but people are still coming. So like we had an anniversary service here not too long ago, and people will come to our service for the first time. And afterwards, because our services aren't 3 hours long like most churches there, and we're not up to, and we did something. We started by not taking up offerings. We have a box in the back. If you want to give, there's a box, or you can do it online. And so people come and says, "Oh, why don't you take the money?" I said, "We're not after your money. We're here to give you the gospel." And that has revolutionized so many people. It says, "Oh, I thought only want our money." No, God wants to give you something. They want to take something from you. And so with that, we're seeing people come in, our service, and he says, didn't think anything like this existed. Sometimes we just think, if we could just get our exposure to people to know who we are and what we're doing, because sometimes we find out that they've already prejudged us before they ever enter the church services. And so our goal is to get them in, to be able to, like we have our choir does Christmas cantatas or Easter cantatas, and we do such as that to get people in. And I do it every year, a 3-night conference on something, parenting or marriage or one of the different areas of things to invite people to come in. So we're doing all kinds of different things and just get them through the door and let God do the rest, you know, the Holy Spirit working on their hearts. Okay? Another question. Good questions. I'm sorry my answers are so long. Yes? Ellos hablan español, y mientras que uno puede hablar español no hay problema. En ese sentido no hay ningún problema con el idioma. Oh, anyway, it's a Spanish-speaking country. There are some indigenous groups that have their own language, like the Aymaras and the Mapuches and such as that, just like here in the United States. But I don't see it's much of a barrier with the language. Now, most Chileans want to learn. They have to take classes in English, where they learn the door, the window, the car, things like that. So if you want to come visit us, how many of you speak Spanish? ¿Habla español aquí? Okay. And come on down. So very friendly. I think that there is an advantage of being American. Sometimes there's a disadvantage because it's kind of a sweet and sour relationship with the United States. There's resentment because the United States has more than them, and then there's envy because they have more than them. And so they trust, like a Chilean pastor, they say, well, why is he a pastor? Does he just want money? But he knows if somebody came all the way from the United States and they know, wow, I'd live in the United States if I could, why would he even want to come down and be in our country? So they don't seem to misjudge our motives of being down there. So I have a certain advantage being an American over being a Chilean because they believe that my motives are pure for being down there. So they know that I took a cut to kind of go down there and not be here. But what their economy is based on is very much mining. And in the video, I show how my grandfather was the first of my family to live in Chile. So my grandfather, 1928, went down to Chile. My dad grew up about 8 years of his life in Chile. That's how I had the connection with Chile. So I now have 4 kids, and 2 of them live in Chile, and 2 of them live in the States. So like at one time I had 1 living in Chile, 1 in France, 1 in Afghanistan, and 1 in the United States, and I kept them from fighting that way. You know, just keep them pretty spread out over there. But the situation is what actually is is the monetary, what keeps the people coming into our country. And so mining, I was going, oh yeah, second. My granddaughters, because I have 6 granddaughters. I don't have any grandsons yet. I got 6 granddaughters. Are the 5th generation of my family to live in Chile. I'm not Chilean, I'm American. My grandfather, my dad, myself, my kids, and my grandkids. So it helps connect and make bridges to people when you're talking about them. And so, but mining is the main thing up and down the coast. Fishing in our town, we have a lot of commercial fishing. And then, other than that, just a lot of other, we got the military in our town, Army, Navy, and Air Force. A lot of immigration, just like here. Their borders are open, our churches, our town is flooded. And so I can listen to somebody speak Spanish and tell you what country they're from, okay? That person's from Bolivia, that person's from Peru, that person's from Venezuela, they're from Colombia, they're from Ecuador, they're from Brazil, they're from Argentina. They all have a distinct accent even though speaking Spanish other than Brazil. And so it's a mixture of a lot of different things that keeps people coming into our town and stuff. One of my problems is that people come in Iquique, if you could see the hills in Iquique, they're just barren. The only thing you can see that's green are the signs on the highway and the police. Other than that, you won't see any green there. And so people get tired of it after a while and they move back to where they come from in the other parts of the country. So we have a big turnover. So we probably have more people that were faithful church members who have left than are actually in the church right now. And so because you just have to add into a church that you're going to lose 10 to 15% annually, so you have to win 10 to 15% of that amount of people to Christ and disciple them just to maintain your church at the same level. That's what happens when because they're military or because they've moved in. We don't have the best universities in our city, so we get our high school kids come up to high school. When they get college age, boom, they're gone. They're gone to Santiago, they're gone to Viña del Mar, they're gone to Puerto Montt, they're gone to one of other cities to study in a university. So that kind of puts a little bit of a problem on our youth department because you don't have that continuity. Then they get married and stuff, and then eventually they come back, but we kind of don't have that university age because everybody wants to go out. So, another question. I got a sermon I could preach to you. Yes. Okay. I live in the Atacama Desert, which is the driest desert on the planet. Not the hottest, the driest. So there, literally, we do not get rain. So once in a while, we get a real freak storm and some water droplets come down. You say, oh, man, it's raining, just a little drizzle. But think of Chile as 3,000 miles long. Now think of the west coast of the United States. Okay, take a strip of 110 miles width of the west coast of our country and invert it, and that's Chile. So because we're south of the equator. So we're up in the north, we're like Baja, California. You go down to southern Chile and you're like Canada and Alaska. And then in the middle, it's like being in California. And so we have the Napa Valley of Chile grapes. Anybody had Chilean grapes here? Normally you have grapes in the wintertime. They either come from Peru or from Chile. And so down in the southern parts where the farms are, where the cattle are and such as that, we don't have too much up in our town because everything's dry. And so a few oases and stuff, but not a lot of production. But mostly fishing, a lot of fishing and stuff. So we get fresh food, and then they bring in all the vegetables and fruits, and so we're really quite rich in that sense. The only fruit they don't grow in Chile, as far as I know, is bananas. We don't have any jungles. Okay, but they do sell them, but they're not from Chile. So, okay. Yes. Well, I thought it was pretty high until I got here. You go to the supermarket, I just got 4 things. Who's been shocked at the supermarket? Who's saying, who can remember when you went to the supermarket and didn't even think about it? So Actually, in some things, it's more expensive there than here. Like we pay about $7 a gallon for gas. So at least we don't have to travel very much, but $7 for gas. And yet, probably buy a piece of property cheaper than you could in the States. Things like TVs and stuff are a little bit more expensive there than here. Food and vegetables might be a little bit more cheaper there than here. I was paying for about 10,000 pesos for eggs. That's $10. $10 for like 30 eggs. That's terrible. I used to pay $4 for 30, and that's gone up to 10. So I'm going to become a vegetarian. So another question. Like I said, I can go into some other areas here, but the idea is that yes. Any what? Yes. First off, there was a lady in our church, and she works. It's not a prison ministry, but she works with the government to do teaching inmates that have come out of the jails on how to be electricians or how to do certain things. And in every one of them, she's able to give the gospel. These trips down south of medicine, they have to connect. The governments have to know what they're doing. We're bringing doctors in. We're giving them free medicine. We're giving them free eyeglasses to these people living on the islands. But they know it's a Baptist group and that they're going to give out the gospel, and they let them give out the gospel because they want these people to get medical care. And so in the schools, in the past, I know that we've done some things in the schools. Probably as time goes on, they're getting more and more to where they're trying to separate it, like here in the States. But the thing is that United States has kind of tendency to want to be a secular country, which they misrepresented the separation of church and states. The idea of the separation of church and states is that the state doesn't tell a church what to do. It wasn't to say exclusively no church. So down there, because they're religious, then even though they're mostly Catholics, they're not opposed to people talking about Christ and putting up nativity scenes and things like that. And so we are able to have some kind of influence in that kind of area. Normally, when there's that kind of stuff, it's in the lower income areas, which are much more open. People that are well-to-do usually have a little bit of a distancing on wanting to be part of that kind of stuff. But we do have a lot more, like I said, we do have a lot more liberties. You can go out door knocking. You can go out and hand out gospel stuff. And I'm finding that people are still open there to the gospel. They're kind of turned off to religion, but they're not turned off to listening to somebody tell them about Jesus Christ. So we are seeing people getting saved and baptized. I don't know, it's just a feeling I have. It seems like I see more there in Chile than back in the States of that openness for people coming in and making decisions for salvation and getting baptized and such as that. So in that sense, I'm thrilled still that we have that influence to be able to do that. But one of the things, I have an extensive counseling ministry there, and a lot of the people we're winning are people who come in for counseling. They're not saved yet. They come in because their marriages are bad, they've got depression, they've got panic attacks and things like that, and they'll come in, referred to by somebody. We're able to give them an answer, but of course we're also going to give them the gospel. If Christ isn't in the answer, there's no answer, obviously. But we're trying to be able to do such, and so people come in, and we had Eduardo and Geraldine come in, and Eduardo was very Catholic, and Geraldine was very Adventist. And somebody recommended that they get married. They're probably about their third marriage or something, but anyway. And so they came in, and I remember the first time they're in my office is, that's why I don't like to do both at the same time usually. And so it's like I couldn't get a word in edgewise and everything else. And so they decided to come back again, and I was dealing with them over a couple of weeks. And one time they said, is there any chance that we could go to your church? And I said, yes. They said, because he hates my church, she said, and she hates his church. And so they wouldn't go to each other's churches, but they could come to our church. Well, then they started coming to our church with their daughter, a junior high daughter, and they didn't want to go home. And the daughter said, this is the only place my parents don't fight. So they started coming to our church because they could come to our church together, and they wanted to stay until the last person was out the door. You ever notice Baptists don't like to go home sometimes, you know? And so, and the pastor's sitting there looking at his watch, you know? And they said, it's because we fight when we get home. Well, we were able to save that. They were in a living together. We were able to save that. They got married, and today they are in charge of our youth department. And so they know what it's like to have homes that are broken and everything else. And a lot of kids are coming in. Chilean homes are a mess. And so we have to do a lot of work towards marriages and stuff there. Okay, and so, but the counseling has helped people come in. They come in for depression. I explain what depression is and such as that, and how to do it without a psychologist, a psychiatric, and all that. And so that has helped tremendously of getting people who normally would not go to a church, but came in looking for some kind of an answer. 60% of Chileans go to psychologists, just to give you that idea. They think psychology has the answers, and they don't. They're like floating anchors. You know, they don't have anything to hang on to. So in that sense, we've seen a number of people come in. They weren't looking for a religious experience, but they came in, and we were able to use that to get the gospel to them. They got saved. They've been baptized. They've been discipled. They are growing. They're in ministries and such as that, and they're bringing their friends and stuff now into the church as well. So that's one of the areas in our church. Now I've got a church down La Serena where they use a soccer program to get kids to come to the soccer program, using that to introduce Christ, and they have a lot of kids coming to their church over that. So each church is different in their appeal and approach to try to see what they can do to help bring in people, because the idea is getting gospel to people, and we either can try to take it to them or try to get them to come and hear the gospel.